Well, hello, hello. Oh, where's my finger? Oh, there it is. Hi, guys. Happy Monday. Welcome to what is another conversation in my DISENRAGE series. The DISENRAGE series is a series of conversations that I'm trying to do that are just higher level, bigger picture, with different kind of interesting guests that I can just sit back and have a civil dialogue with about interesting experiences they've had in their lives or how they see the world. I really think that in terms of like the craziness going on in the world, a lot of us are caught up in this reality where we're only focused on the news, we're only focused on the day-to-day minutia, and life is just so much bigger than that. And I think there's so many interesting people out in the world who might not always share our political perspectives, but that there's a reason that they have the perspectives that they do. And I think it's important to learn about those things because you're going to pressure test if you're wrong. It's never a bad idea to test your own principles and make sure that you are keeping on your toes that way. But it's also just important to understand why other people have the opinions and the experiences that they do. And you don't need to agree with them in order to be able to understand and see their perspective and say, oh, okay, I get it. That's why they're doing that. That's why they see the world the way they do. I might not agree with it. I might not choose to live my life that way, but wouldn't the world be a pretty boring place if we were all doing the same thing and thinking the same thing? That's not a world I want to live in, and I hope you don't either. Well, I've got a great guest today, and I will introduce him in a minute. I'm sure he's going to piss at least 50% of you off, but we've always been able to have good conversation when I've been on his Twitch channels, and I know we're going to bring the same thing here. But before we get into that, I wanted to just do a quick promo for some other chats I've got coming up this week in the DISENRAGE series. Of course, on Wednesday, I will be taking a very light stroll through the park in the DISENRAGE series and going back to the question of Hitler. That's not actually what we'll be talking about. I'm bringing Dan Smots on the show, and we are actually going to have a conversation about spirituality, different types of belief systems. Dan was raised as a Christian, I think had a little bit of a falling out with them, kind of considers himself a Christian now, but I also do know he has other beliefs that are not necessarily mainstream Christianity. He's also just a really cool guy, and he's a little bit weird, and he's kind of like the type of weird that makes me feel normal. So of course I like to have that thing on the show every once in a while. So we're going to be doing that on Wednesday. I'm really excited about that. And then on Thursday we are going to have Jennifer on the stream, and Jennifer had an experience of growing up in a conservative Christian cult. Not something you get to hear about every day, but we love Jennifer. She's a wonderful member of my locals community, and I can't wait to hear more about her story and share it with all of you. I also wanted to let you guys know that in addition to the live streams that I'm doing on my main YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dr. Dr. Karlyn Borsenko, Dr. Karlyn Borisenko, I am also putting the DISENRAGE series on all the podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, all that good stuff. So if you want an audio only version that you can like take with you in your pocket, if you don't want to pay YouTube for the privilege of doing so, you can subscribe to these in Apple Podcasts and all the other places. And please make sure you give it a good review if you choose to subscribe in it there. That really helps it out and helps get more people exposed to it. Finally, as always, if you would like to support the work I'm doing, the very best way you can do that is by joining my Locals community. Locals is the most sane place on the internet because it is a place where we are actually able to have human conversations. And we are going to be having one of those human conversations in my Locals tonight in but 2 short hours when we have our regular weekly Monday community Zoom. This is a community Zoom that is exclusive for my local supporters, but I've decided for the month of July, because I guess it's just, one of the months that we do these things, I've decided to give you guys a little promo code. So if you have been thinking about joining my Locals and you're not quite sure if it's worth the $5 a month or the $50 a year, for the rest of July only, you can use the promo code July in the monthly subscribe option, and that will give you a free month. So you will have until August 11th to check it out, see if you like it. So plenty of time for you to sign up to join my community Zoom at 7 p.m. and get to meet a whole bunch of amazing people, and it won't cost you anything, which is really great. After that free month, you're going to want to do either you can continue with $5 a month, that's totally cool, or you can upgrade to your annual membership for $50 a year. All that helps keep the channel going, and I really appreciate it. All right, guys, with the shilling out of the way, I want to bring in my guest for today. Now, I keep calling him a socialist. I know that he fancies himself as a left leaning libertarian, and we're going to find out more about him. But from Twitch politics streaming fame, we have Spectre, and I've been on Spectre's show like once or twice, and we've always been able to have good conversations. So even though we greatly differ politically, I'm looking forward to today's chat about how he sees the world. Spectre, welcome to the stream.
Hey, great to be here. Yeah, no, I love what you were saying in the intro about having this series where we can go and talk to people with differing views. I do think that the reason that things are getting so polarized in the country right now is actually because things are getting worse, and each side is being told that the other is the enemy and that you have to pretty much get rid of or like eliminate the values of your enemy in order to get your way now. So if we
Mm-hmm.
don't have these like inter ideology dialogues, I'm afraid that we are going to move into a direction where there's just this continued gridlock and things continue to get worse, which we can't really take too much more of at this point. So yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I feel like neither side is really listening to the other. And, I mean, I've been on an interesting political evolution. Obviously, I think you've been following along with it for a while. And I'm at the point where I'm like, F both of you. I don't even care about either of your bullshit anymore because I just think that both of the different tribes are just acting like children. And at some point, people have to behave like adults and actually try to have adult conversations.
Yeah, and I think the more that we see people do that, hopefully the more that we'll find things that are actionable that the majority of Americans agree on, which I do think is the case, and we can start, working on fixing all of the problems in the country, of which there are many, instead of the boring culture war stuff.
Well, that's definitely true. Well, let's jump right into it. How do you fashion yourself politically? What do you call yourself?
Um, So I would say that I'm a socialist. I don't have any like grand utopian ways that I would say that I would like paint society. I don't think utopian political goals are reasonable to work towards. But like generally, I would want to move things more in the direction of uh, working class people having more political power. Um, like actionable things right now would just be unions, better like workers' rights as far as I think the right to work laws need to be done away with. The union has a contract with an employer that says, hey, you can't hire non like union people, then that should be a contract that they can just kind of seek out in the free market, as it were.
Hmm. How did your political views kind of evolve?
I actually voted for Gary Johnson in 2012, so I did start
Oh
off
gosh.
on the right side of the libertarian spectrum. And then I got more poor, and I started to like also understand like that taxation isn't necessarily bad. It's just when we do it in this country, 50% of it goes to the military, which means
Mm,
that you don't get to interact like with your taxes as much, which of course you're not going to want to pay them if you're not actually getting to interact with like the benefits of your taxes, because they're just like spent on bombing hospitals in the Middle East or something instead of like,
mhm,
public transportation, for example.
mhm,
And then also that the wrong people are being taxed, that we're not taxing people at the top quite enough, and that if that's done correctly and then money's redistributed where it has more velocity, it can have a deflationary effect. Because like since we've switched to fiat currency, that's been a pretty unsustainable system economically for a lot of reasons, but mainly just nobody really is addressing the core causes of inflation. And we're starting to see that kind of come to a bottleneck now.
Well, I mean, I definitely agree with that, and we were kind of talking about this before the stream, so maybe this is like a good jumping off point. Like, I actually think that if we're talking about the inflation that we have now, I mean, this is Trump inflation. This isn't even Biden inflation yet. This is Trump inflation from the stimulus and the pandemic in 2020, and I think that we're about to be in for a world of hurt because the Biden and I'd be interested in your perspective about how the Biden administration has handled all of this, since they took office. They're in my view, they are just failing at every single level to recognize the things that are actually important, and they're doubling down. And I don't think it's going to go well for us. I don't think it's going well for us now, and I really don't think it's going to go well for us in about a year.
So it's very clearly not going well for us now. Those of us who like pay attention to how much our groceries cost and like how
Hmm.
much gas we're sticking in our car, like know that obviously this is worse than it was 2 years ago. And you're right, this is just the Trump stuff. We haven't seen the Biden stuff. So what I see is like basically Trump was giving away more money than Biden was to businesses and to working people. Let's be fair. Like he sent more in the checks too, like Trump did. And then Biden basically said for like working class people and people who maybe still needed to stay on unemployment, fuck you, we're cutting all your shit. but I'm going to continue to give massive giveaways to big business now. And that's actually where you're going to have more of an inflationary effect, because when you give to corporations or like just rich people in general, the money has less velocity, is what they call it in an economic term. So the velocity of money is how many times it's going to change hands before it ends up in like some asshole's offshore bank account. So if you can inject the money into the economy as a government, you want to put it in the pockets of people who are going to spend it and actually use that to stimulate the economy and then therefore create jobs, right? But Biden literally stopped doing that and then continued the giveaways to the people where the money is going to have like less velocity, which is going to cause those injections to have a more inflationary effect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's just going to get worse, and unless you start closing tax loopholes for like the ultra rich, you're going to see inflation not really have a way to like even be curbed, as it were.
Are you optimistic about, where we're going as a country right now? How do you feel?
Um, no. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm planning on moving out of the country either later this year or like year after that personally. I'm tired. I've like worked my entire adult life, and I'd like for like some of that money to start being thought about like retiring eventually. And that's not something that's really reasonable here. So yeah, as lazy as it sounds, I'm going to go somewhere else where workers have already like bargained for unions and gotten like to where you make 18 bucks an hour making a Big Mac, yeah. Um, and take advantage of that and be more than happy to pay the higher taxes that you get as a result there.
Hmm. I mean, if you could wave a magic wand and change some of the things that are happening right now, what would you change?
Um, Again, I think that if you're going to inject money into the economy, that it's kind of like and an issue that I've evolved on, like maybe this year, is like the school choice stuff, right? Rather than giving money to corporations and letting them decide like who's paid a raise, give it to their employees so they can decide like which corporations to spend money with, stimulate the economy that way. So just like start having conversations about like what is it that we need in our community and what can we agree on that maybe the left and the right don't
Mhm.
necessarily disagree on as much as you might think based on the way that they talk in Washington. And I think 9 times out of 10 that most people agree like we're probably not getting paid enough right now. Most people have issues with their health insurance system, and I'm not even saying that necessarily needs to be switched to a single payer healthcare system, but there are very reasonable, actionable things we can do there. If we're going to talk about mental health being an issue every time that there's a mass shooting, then we have to start talking about, okay, well, what do we do to actually fix this mental health crisis?
Mhm.
Because obviously, just lecturing kids to stop being upset about it like isn't having the results. So yeah, just little things like that.
Do you think that they have any vested interest in wanting to fix the mental health crisis? Because I don't. They show me absolutely no signs of wanting to fix. I think I don't see any signs of them wanting to fix the education system where we're seeing massive learning loss, which was completely predictable. Entirely the fault of the teachers unions, and the teachers unions are just doubling down there that they have any interest in fixing the when there's a mental health crisis. I mean, how many like they're completely in bed with the pharmaceutical companies, and let's just like put aside the vaccine stuff for a second. Like, I mean, like antidepressants, like ADHD medication, like all of that is coming from somewhere as well. And so I don't actually see any positive incentive for them to fix any of the problems that we're dealing with.
Yeah, no, I grew up in Appalachia, like right as Purdue was starting to tear through it with like opioids. So I have like lots that we can talk about with Big Pharma that I disagree
Mhm.
with. That being said, no, I don't. So I think that as a society, we do have an incentive to fix it, because the thing about the mental health crisis is that it's feeding into our houselessness crisis in a way that we can't even like house our way out of it, if that makes sense. We have homes that we're trying to put people into, but due to the fact that these homes don't come with like the mental health services that they're going to need, they're just resulting in like homelessness that we can't even buy our way out of that way. So as a society, I would say, our incentive is to get these people back to where they have jobs, they're tax-paying citizens just like you and me, and they're contributing to the economy in other ways, right? That would be our incentive as a society. But as far as the people in charge, no, they're not behaving in like such a way that I think that they seem to care about this.
Well, I mean, I think it's even bigger than that, though, because I'm not even talking about people who might be in a home or something like that. I'm talking about your average person that might be experiencing severe depression, anxiety from watching the news all day, being obsessed with the news all day. The fact that we're over medicating kids starting in school, the fact that schools are now prescribing medication for kids, sometimes without even telling the parents. And if we look at like the political left, I mean, there is a disproportionately high amount of mental illness on the political left, and I attributed that to I attributed it to the education system, to be honest, to be almost entirely, because I think that in college they're learning to be afraid all the time. They're learning to constantly pick out the boogeyman. And I'm not necessarily against education, obviously I'm not, but I also think that there are ways to educate people which are productive, and I don't think that that's going on in our system. And we're seeing that as soon as kids enter college, they are significantly more likely to experience mental health issues, and they might be perfectly able to function in the normal world. But when you have, I think I saw a statistic the other day, I think it was maybe from Scott Adams or something, so take it for what it's worth, but it was like something like 40% of women are on like antidepressants or some sort of like medication like that. And his question was, if 40% of them are women on like the left, and if 40% of them are on this medication, how many of them need this medication that aren't already on it? And that to me was like, holy shit, he's right, because most people, when they have mental health problems, they're not able to recognize it.
Yeah, and access to medicine in this country is not near what we need it to be for those kind of things either, which yeah, you're not addressing the underlying cause obviously all the time by medicating it, but that can be almost used as like triage. And obviously we have like a mental health crisis at this point. So if we could increase access to those medicines, that'd be great. As far as what's causing it, you kind of touched on it, in my opinion, a little bit when you talked about the watching the news all day, constantly glued into the internet. Um, a lot of people are self-medicating with like short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops through social media.
Yeah.
We have like studies that indicate that social media, things like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, does cause the brain to behave in a way similar to what it does when it's addicted on actual substances, right? It does have those dopamine feedback loops, and it is like you can see in the studies, like kids who are on social media, kids who aren't, it is increasing like rates of severe depression by like 25%, I believe it was. So, yeah, just the way the society's evolved, we're constantly, glued to these.
Mhm.
It's not good. Like we've like meshed our kind of collective consciousness with our phones, and it's not looking like they were built to do much when that happens, except for generate profit for a bunch of bug-eyed salamanders in Silicon Valley. So
Mhm, mhm. I agree. Emphasize says, "My home is a shed. Calling it a house is taxable." Well, we wouldn't want that emphasized. Taxation is theft. No, but I also think that, I don't know how you use social media, but the way I had to eventually set up my Twitter was I look at Twitter almost entirely based on Twitter lists at this point, where I'm not even looking in my main feed. Sorry for people who I follow who think I look at your stuff. I don't. But I have all my lists segmented, so I have like my lefty news, my conservative news, my libertarian news. I have a whole section for like the total left-wing crazies. I have a whole section for the total right-wing crazies. And it is actually bizarre to me to look at Twitter in this very kind of compartmentalized fashion, because if you look at like left, right, and libertarian, these groups of people are living in completely different realities. Like just completely different. They see the world in completely different ways. And that's something that's deeply concerning to me, because I'm like, if we are quite literally living in different realities, how are we even able to start communicating with each other and having these conversations?
yeah, and I mean it's like I think it was a tweet that I even sent you the other day where I was like reminded of a time that I've like first time checked conservative Twitter. It was like, oh no, they did straight up just lie about Trump here. Oh, they just straight up lied about a man that gives them nothing but like 24 hours of material for them to bitch about things. They felt the need to then make something up. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, we have a problem because it is like a both sides thing, like you're saying. We're creating these like echo chambers where people can just kind of like build out their own reality. And then if somebody says something that you disagree with, they present like a fact that you disagree with, there's no way to really verify that because you've trained yourself to put them in the socialist box or put them in the conservative box or put them in the libertarian box. And once you have them in that box, you don't have to take anything they say seriously after that. And I think that's the way a lot of people are now forming opinions, and social media has played a big part in that, just able to kind of like compartmentalize out things.
Hmm. What are some of the topics being discussed that you're seeing a lot of on social media right now?
Um, a lot of it is culture war stuff. With the
What do you mean when you say culture war stuff?
So I would say like the drag queen discourse.
Oh, yeah.
With like
This
that I would
drives me
consider just
crazy on both
cr-
sides.
yeah. A lot of pro-life discussion, a lot of pro-choice. I'm obviously on the left, lean more pro-choice. Um, I understand the pro-life argument. It's just to me the bodily autonomy of the mother like takes precedent over the potential life. And then once the mother decides to keep it, we start treating it as though we're a potential life because that's really the only thing that I can think logically gives something personhood. But
Mhm. So I mean, let's talk about that a little bit. So we got the drag queen issue, which we can talk about that too. But like, let's talk about the abortion stuff because
Mhm.
my interest in the abortion stuff is that like I'm never gonna have an abortion. Like that's just not going to happen. And I planned my life very specifically to be on birth control and to use condoms, so I never had to have an abortion. But like I think that as soon as I saw the draft Roe decision, I was basically like I mean, like anyone who follows my Twitter know, I went scorched earth on conservatives and was like, "You motherfuckers, fucked this up admirably." And it was because not because I'm like necessarily like abortion, abortion, rah rah rah. It's more that it took over everything, and I was like, this is a complete and total distraction to every issue that we could actually be focused on, and now it's just gonna force people into their tribes even further, and I think we're gonna see the rise of like a Christian moral majority right who are only focused on this issue as they always have been. And it's just one of those things I was like, God damn it. Like, what the smartest thing that the Republicans ever could have done is when that draft decision got leaked, they could have gone right to the Democrats and said, let's just do a compromise. Let's just do a compromise. Like on to codify it into law on a federal level, first trimester with exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother, which some people might not think that's lenient enough. I'm fine with that. Like find some sort of common ground compromise that everyone can get on board with, where everyone feels like they won a little bit and move on with life. But were the Republicans going to do that? No, of course not. And even if they had, the Democrats never would have accepted it because they want everything. So I guess like if you were in charge, how would you have handled the abortion issue in the last several months?
I think the discussion needs to be had from like just the angle of showing we're in. This is the thing, is that nobody believes anybody's stats anymore. Nobody believes anybody's studies. But if you do look at the data, like what you will see very clearly is that making abortion illegal doesn't actually lower the amount of abortions that happen in countries. The only thing that it does is it increases the amount of unsafe abortions that are happening, and the World Health Organization and you can probably find this through other sources if I understand people that are skeptical of them right now, but they say that a woman is dying every 8 minutes seeking an unsafe abortion before this decision. And now we're putting like a significant more amount of the world's population under that.
Mhm.
If you want to decrease the amount of abortions, if you think abortions are bad, you can increase access to contraceptives. Like you said, birth control is awesome. A lot of people do not have access to contraceptives the way that we think they do in this country. Sex education has been demonstrated to lower the amount of abortions that happen. We can offer maternity leave. We can incentivize companies to offer maternity leave if we don't want to mandate it, right? Like we can compromise there. There are so many other things that we can have conversation about that have actually been demonstrated to lower the abortion rate that people would agree on, that isn't outright banning it, and is also more effective at lowering the amount of abortions that happen. And I think that if we could have that conversation, and if people weren't trained to be so skeptical of each other, like looking at the data, that we could look into like those kind of compromises. But that's just not the not the political makeup that the social medias have left us with in this country. So yeah.
No, I agree, and emphasize further emphasizes that point where he says, "Birthing person, you bigot, get woke." Yeah, that stuff doesn't help either. Thank you, emphasize for that. But no, I mean, I agree with you, and I said the same thing to conservatives. I was like, if you guys really want to save babies, if saving babies is the legitimate goal here, then this is not going to do that. It's not. I think it's going to end up creating more abortions, not less, because I think that people are going to like. I mean, maybe maybe it's going to even just like create the semblance of more abortions, where more people are going to be talking about how they had to go out of state to get an abortion. So maybe it'll even just seem like more. I don't know, but I think that it's not going to reduce anything, and there are any number of things that conservatives could do if they wanted to do that. But even it's not like they like sex ed in schools. It's not like they like access to birth control. They try to get rid of this stuff all the time. And it's like, all right, so then you don't actually care about saving babies. What you care about is the political win against your enemy.
And for those of them who care about that political win in the first place, like controlling women's bodies to a certain extent, like there is a certain degree of like people who want to reestablish like patriarchal norms in the society.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are quite a few incels who look at it as like, well, if a woman can't get an abortion, she'll be more choosy and picky about who she has sex with. And now I have a like higher availability of trad wives. Like I do think that there's a contingent in this country that thinks that way. Whether that's like the majority of Republicans that are for this, no, of course not. I think most of them are probably worried about babies, but again, we don't have these conversations, and they don't take us at our word. We do get an opportunity to have these conversations, so they're not interested in any of those options.
Now, how do you feel about like late term abortions? Because like so in New Hampshire, we have a law that's like I think I want to say it's 24 weeks except with exceptions for rape, incest and life of the mother after that, which I think is a more than fair compromise, to be honest, on abortion. Like 24 weeks to find out you're pregnant is like a really long time. And so I think that that's a really fair compromise, but we still have the Democrats and the progressives in New Hampshire who are like you're inhibiting an access for a woman's right to choose. And Jeremy Kaufman, who's running for Senate as a libertarian in New Hampshire, actually looked into the issue and he was like, how many abortions in New Hampshire happened after 24 weeks? And it was one. We were arguing about one person in the entire state for whom this was going to become an issue, and it's like this issue that they are blowing up to make it be about everything, and it really doesn't even impact any real human lives. So what are your thoughts on late term abortions, and have Democrats gone too far with it, and is there any room to compromise?
I would say that in that instance that you brought up specifically, not taking the compromise was really, really dumb. That's a fine compromise, probably. I'm assuming it made exceptions for like endangering the life of the mother, right? If it's
Yeah.
going to, okay. Yeah, I mean, I would have to hear arguments about like why limiting it to the first trimester is bad. I know that the kind of communal law at the time when the country was founded was basically that you can't have an abortion after quickening, and quickening is what they refer to like when the baby begins to kick, right? So I'd say that's probably going to be second trimester area if I had to guess, and that's the way that like society did it for quite a while before this became such a politicized issue. This is the way that I would assume that it was done. Yeah, in biblical times, like with the Talmud, they actually didn't consider it until birth, according to like Talmudic law and Jewish law. But as far as we can tell with like common law, out of like English and Anglo communities. Yeah, it was just pre-quickening. Society did it for hundreds of years. There was no problem. I don't see why fighting for more is necessary. That being said, I haven't heard any like far left arguments as to why like you need to be able to kill the baby up until birth. Um,
What do
I
you
wouldn't know how to argue for that.
what do you think about these women who are like, screaming like, like that they're proud of their abortion, or like there was a photo that came out the other week of a woman who was like, I mean, very, very, very visibly pregnant, with, her tummy was like all sticking out, and she wrote on it, like, this is not a child. And I'm like, that kind of seems like a child to me. Like you're probably like 7 to 8 months along. Like you still want to kill that? That to me seems like a little inhumane. What do you think when you see some of these women doing these things?
7 to 8 months along. I can't really give you a reason for it, but it feels to me like wanting to get an abortion at that point. It feels icky, right? But
Yeah.
then again, if I'm like pro-choice at 14 weeks, and then I'm like not pro-choice, then I can't tell you exactly why I now consider it to be a baby. Maybe like I guess actually at 7 months, it's going to probably be viable outside the womb, right?
I would think so.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good argument, is like viability of baby outside the womb. Maybe shouldn't kill it then. Um, but
What
then also it just feels like instinctively wrong to me. I would concede that, but I don't know. There's probably some lefties that could tell me why I'm like a very big misogynist for saying this.
Oh, and I'm sure they probably will. They'll call you
Yeah.
that just for, even having this conversation. They'll insult you for something. What do you think about this idea that some conservatives have about like creating like an artificial womb or something? And so if a woman wants to have an abortion, like take the baby out and put it in an artificial womb, like even before it's like, fully completely viable on its own. I don't know what I think about this, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world when like, these if this was like a pure hypothetical where there's no danger to the life of the mother at all, like no impact on her ability to have a kid later, right? For example, or anything like that. Yeah, at that point, maybe it is wrong to even allow any kind of abortion, right? We can just grow the baby in a test tube.
Yeah, but that doesn't seem humane to me either.
Uh, to like force her to like grow the baby in a test tube.
Yeah.
I mean, it would also depend on like what's happening with the baby after, like is it being entered into like current foster care system, and then you have like a whole other like ethical set of questions. Um, but in a perfect world, if it wasn't going to affect the life of the mother at all, should we be able to mandate abortions if we can just grow the baby in a test tube? Um, no, I still feel like it should just be the woman's choice, just based off of like the bodily autonomy argument, honestly, with the violinist, if you're familiar with that one. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't buy into this argument that conservatives get it or that pro-lifers give it all, which is like, well, it's the babies too, but you know what? The baby needs me to live, and so I should get to have some say in that. And I don't know why that's so hard for them to wrap their heads around at all.
Yeah, that's the violinist argument where they pose the hypothetical, like if you wake up tomorrow and you're like have an IV between you and a violinist and you're told that you're having to transfuse blood with him for the next 9 months to keep his kidney alive. You disconnect the IV, he'll die. By disconnecting the IV, are you now a murderer? It's like, well, no, they literally just like strapped you up to a dude for 9 months and
Mhm.
decided that you didn't want to let him use your body to live.
Exactly. All right. Anything else to say on the abortion issue?
Um, I'm very curious to see if it's the win for their base that they think it is, because it's definitely energized the Democrats, but I also don't think that it's energized them enough to win the midterms. So I think those are probably going to go red this time around.
I think they're definitely gonna go red, but I don't think that they're going to get nearly the red wave that they think that they're going to get. Like, all I've been hearing from women who, like, real walkaway Democrats, people who voted for, like, Republicans for the first time in 2020, I've heard from so many of them that have said, "I will never vote Republican again for them
Hmm.
doing this." Like, they are livid, they are pissed, and I don't think that these are conversations that they're having with, like, people outside of their very close circles or like women that they know. I think it's one of those things that like this is a conversation that's happening among women, but it doesn't go really beyond that because they don't want to piss their husbands off or they just don't want to get into it. It's just not worth it for them. And I think that a lot I even think they're lying to pollsters, to be really honest with you. About what's going on. And so I always laugh when I see all of these more conservative, like leaning pollsters saying women don't really care about this at all. I'm like, this is all I've heard about from women, like, for weeks after that draft decision was leaked. Like, you guys don't know what the F you're talking about. So, I mean, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, no, every woman that I've spoken to has been very upset about it. It seems to have energized that side of the base. Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. I think that it's going to cost the Republicans some wins in the midterms, but it's still going to go their way, even though not to the degree it would have if they could have just left well enough alone until after.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, we'll see. And to be frank, like I don't even care at this point, to be honest. I don't care which one of them wins. I don't think either of them are good, and so it doesn't really matter to me either way. Um, let's talk about drag queens. What do you think
Okay.
about the drag queen issue?
Um, so the only thing that I saw in like the incident that I was familiar with, even like to a small degree, because I honestly tried not to pay too much attention to it, and it that kind of bothered me was the sign that was like it's not gonna lick itself.
Mm.
That was just kind of like, and it wasn't like to the degree that I thought it deserved the backlash that it did, but it was just kind of like, maybe that's kind of in poor taste. But then, somebody points out to you, it's like, well, you take your kids to see a Shrek movie and you think of all the innuendo in there that they don't really get. And it's like, okay, yeah. And it was an ice cream shop that's obviously LGBTQ friendly during Pride Month. Otherwise, they wouldn't be hosting this. So it's an ice cream shop that's making a cheeky gay joke, and they didn't take their sign down for the drag queens that are doing like a kid friendly event. Like, yeah, it's not the end of my world. But then you'd see like other things where it's like, well, here's this kid putting like a dollar bill in this woman's thong, and then you come to learn that that's actually from a burlesque show. So that was like a straight drag performance, because burlesque is straight drag, basically, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, that's actually a fair point. I hadn't thought about it
but
like that.
so like I don't know, it felt like a whole lot of nothing. Every time that I tried to look into the specifics that people were getting like really upset about there, I'd find like that the videos weren't from where they were claiming it were. But I'm sure that if you like look far enough, you're going to see like backlash opinions to this that are awful. That it's like, well, if I want to take like my 8-year-old to a strip club, then I should be able to do that. Like that's my God-given right. It's like maybe no, like maybe we do respect the innocence of like children to a certain extent, but just like I don't see how man wearing dress breaks that innocence.
Yeah. I mean, I'm of mixed feelings about it. It's like, at first I'm kind of like, kids don't even know what a drag queen is. They don't. They like, I never really had a problem with like drag queen story hour or things like that, as long as they were dressed appropriately and all of the bits were covered and all of these things. And, like, because I kind of thought like kids view this as a cartoon character. That's what that's going to be the reference in their heads. This is something for adults to make adults feel like they're being open and inclusive and accepting and all that crap, but it's not really about the kids at all. The kids probably don't really care. But then like when I started seeing some of the drag shows, and I don't think that all of them were really that bad, to be honest. Like that one that I think you're referencing, with it ain't gonna lick itself. Well, like some of the kids that were there probably couldn't even read, didn't even know what that meant. So does it really hurt them? Probably not. But I did see like one video did bother me where it was like this one drag queen at like an all ages drag show or something that was basically in a thong with like full tits hanging out with like pasties leading a child up and down the aisle. I'm like, that seems like a little bit much to me. That seems like a little too close to stripping for me to be comfortable with kids being around that. Um, so I kind of I do think that the sexualization of children is a problem. I think what they're doing with teaching it in schools at younger and younger ages. Like I read a kid's book that was meant for 4 to 8 year olds like not too long ago on my channel, and it was it was porn. It was porn. It was like legitimate, like he sticks his penis in her vagina and pushes in and out. And then when it feels the nicest, he, comes in her or like whatever. I was like, holy shit, this is not for 4 year olds. And it's got like a straight cartoon of them having sex. And so I think that, as much as I think that some of the drag queen stuff is overblown, I also think that the sexualization of kids is a problem. And I don't see that coming from the right. I see it coming from the left. What do you think?
Um, I don't know. So I would have to hear what the reasoning of like the child psychologist or developmental psychologist who like wrote a book for 4-year-olds like depicting graphic sex acts. Like what?
Oh, I don't think it was a developmental psychologist who wrote it at all.
Okay, well I would have to. It sounds like terrible to me, but like again, I'm a prude, so I'd probably agree. Like even the woman in a bikini, like maybe don't have that like around 5-year-olds or like straight up thong, even if it is like a cis woman or like a drag queen.
Mhm.
But I just don't feel comfortable about like mandating what other people do with their kids until it starts to go over into the territory of abuse personally. So even though it's like weird to me, I don't know if I'd mandate it, but like if books were starting to be like you said 4 to 8-year-olds, so like yeah, 4 is like pre-kindergarten. If they're showing like graphic sex acts to 4-year-olds, I would just probably want to try and understand why they think that that's going to be good for the kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, because I just can't personally see it.
And you know what, man, I kind of agree with you too about like, people fuck up their kids all the time. there are any number of things that people can do to screw their kids up, and like conservative Christians, as we're going to find out later this week with the woman coming on my channel talking about being raised in a Christian cult, like they can screw up their kids just as much as leftists who sexualize their kids too early. There are any number of things that can be done, and I don't want to make it illegal for people to screw up their kids. Like everyone would be having their kids taken away left and right if we did that. But I guess I just don't like I guess I wonder when it became socially acceptable to teach kindergarten through 3rd graders about sex. Like, I mean, we saw this uproar about the, so-called "Don't Say Gay" bill in Florida. Like, what did you think of that?
I think that there are now like so I think that with that bill there, I think that there's now been reports of them like having to take down like LGBTQ pride flags, that like teachers who have like a same-sex partner and pictures of them, like even on their desk, are being asked to remove them apparently. Um, so it does seem to me that the bill is kind of being interpreted in the way that some critics were like concerned about it being interpreted, that it is treating any kind of acknowledgement that same-sex attracted people exist, as sexualizing kids, which is obviously not what we want. I think even supporters of the bills, for the most part, were saying that they wanted it to mean, just don't sexualize kids, and don't like show sexual stuff to kids that you shouldn't be. But when now we're seeing like those examples that I brought up of like people having to remove pictures of their spouse in them, I don't know. It seems like maybe it's been taken too far.
No, and I agree that would be taken too far, and I think even I feel like I recall Ron DeSantis saying something explicitly about that, saying like you can talk about like your partner, your spouse, whatever, but it was talking about sex overtly that was the problem. But then on the other hand, I'm kind of like, why do they need to have a pride flag in a kindergarten classroom? I mean, like, is that critical to them learning the things that they need to learn in kindergarten? Not that I think there's anything wrong with being gay, I don't, but like, why does that have to be hanging up in a kindergarten classroom?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could make arguments either way, because if like you're taking that down, then like, are we not going to let the "Don't Tread on Me" flag also in kindergarten classrooms? If like kindergarten, if it's
I
just
don't think
like
that
on
needs
a
to be on the kindergarten walls either.
okay,
I mean, they don't because again, they don't even know what that means. Like,
yeah, so
you know,
that's fair, and like I wouldn't say that it's necessary to the child's learning. I think that the teacher should like be free to have it up or not personally, but beyond that, if we just like take that away and then move on to there are now like parents who are taking teachers to court over having like pictures of their same-sex spouse like on their desk. Like that's the law being interpreted the way that we were concerned it would be, in my opinion. It's being like weaponized
yeah.
against um, people who are part of the LGBTQ community. So
And I
not a
think
fan of the bill, basically.
well, and that's fine. You're allowed not to like it. I think that it's an important and necessary bill, especially when we have books depicting overt sex acts. And it's kind of like, could it be interpreted and used in ways that it's not intended? Sure, but I also think are the do those things supersede like not teaching young kids about sex? I mean, I think that probably that's the greater good, and then work out the details of it later, make updates, do whatever you need to do to if people want to have a picture of their spouse on their desk, I don't really care about that, but maybe that's something that can be handled in a future update. No one is going to lose a limb over the fact that someone doesn't have a picture on their desk. Like it's fine. Everyone will survive. Um, but I also kind of think it's like, well, you mentioned school choice earlier, so maybe we can talk about this. You said your views had evolved on that. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, I've seen like more successful models than like North Carolina be practiced, and I've seen like success rates that weren't so much broken up around like income lines. So it's very obvious to me that if there are success stories with it from other countries that we can look at,
Hmm.
that there is some merit to doing it correctly is going to have a positive impact. And I like parents being able to like take the money that the government used to just give to schools and directly like move that around. Like that's going to be appealing sounding to everyone. I think that where people's concerns are is if that money will just kind of like bottleneck into certain schools that maybe lower income people wouldn't have access to, even with the voucher, just out of purely even like maybe for transportation reasons, for example. Um, and I think that those concerns are valid, right? But public education in this country is just so fucking fundamentally broken that we have to try something. It's getting bad. The only reason that I'm from Tennessee, right, and living in Kentucky
Mhm.
right now, and the only reason that Tennessee like has a literacy rate that's competitive with the rest of the country is Dolly Parton single-handedly
Yes.
financing all of the literacy programs in the state.
That woman is a
Um,
saint for real.
yeah, and that's like an outlier amongst the southern states. Like I said, now I'm in Kentucky. The literacy rate here is dog shit. We're just talking about people's ability to read and write. So something has to change. I think that school choice has the potential to do that. I'm like dating a Swedish girl right now who's a product like a charter school over there. She's highly intelligent, says that it works for her.
Oh, that's why you wanna
Um,
move. Now we're getting into the meat of it, yep. Mhm.
yeah, that's also helpful. Dating somebody who's already been in the municipal housing queue for a couple of years, so you can
Mhm.
skip the line. That's the master plan. No, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, like yeah, there's an argument for school choice working if it's done well. I think that the concerns of people who are against it are valid in some cases, and that those concerns should obviously be taken into account when it's being implemented. Since at this point it does look like it's going to be implemented. Like I think that that side of the fight is winning, and that there's nothing that we're really going to see break up that momentum unless the state implements it and then it goes to shit. In which case, we're probably going to be back at the drawing board.
Mhm. So I accidentally kind of went a little bit viral on political like New Hampshire Twitter yesterday because it came out that check this out. I am the libertarian nominee for governor in New Hampshire and
Congratulations!
I thank
Nice.
you. Thank you. It was a complete accident. I wasn't planning it at all. But so the Democrat that's running for governor did some internal polling and they included me in the poll. And apparently I am polling in New Hampshire at 8% right now without even trying. I swear to God. I swear to God. Um, but the reason that it's all funny games until you accidentally get elected governor of New Hampshire. But the reason that I asked that is that my platform for governor has been entirely around like defunding the public schools, separating the education from government and all that stuff. And as soon as it came out that I was polling at 8%, all of the Democratic state reps started complaining about like me wanting to put cameras in classrooms and me wanting to decouple the state and education and all that. And what was so telling to me was I was putting up education statistics from nationsreportcard.gov, which is like a government website that has basically tracked the results of testing and stuff like that over the past 3 decades. It's nonpartisan, like the data is just the data, and it says that well, nationally, I don't know the New Hampshire numbers off the top of my head, but nationally, 36% of kids graduate from high school knowing how to read. 33% of them graduate from high school knowing how to write. 26% of them graduate from high school knowing how to do math. And that's at like a proficient rate, which, if we're investing $20,000 per student per year, I want them graduating from high school being proficient in reading, writing, and math. I don't think that that's too much to ask. But there was also a basic category that's like they know kind of enough to get by but are not anywhere close to the level of proficiency. So in New Hampshire, we have a pretty decent rate in terms of basic education, but if we're looking at proficient education, it's less than 50% on all of the markers. And the Democrats were making the argument, they were like, we have one of the best education systems in the country. Look at our rate. And I was like, that is for a basic education. This is for like I can barely read a fourth grade level book when I'm a senior in high school. Like that's what that number is for. And the Democrats were celebrating that and saying this is the reason that we should continue to invest in public education. And I was like, you idiots are making your case for me or my case for me. Like that is absurd that you would accept a basic level of education and say that this is the best that we can possibly do. And the reason I bring that up is you said that, the public school system is obviously failing. The Democrats, at least in my state, seem to be celebrating that failing and thinking it's good. What do you why do you say that the public schools are failing and might be irrevocably broken?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just all the stats that you just cited. Like I said, I'm from Appalachia, so take those and cut them in a third, and that's what you're
Mhm.
looking at for most of the states where I grew up. So to the extent that it's failing there, it's failing here equally as bad. I lived in Los Angeles for 5 years. The public schools there, um, it's based off of property taxes, right? So the public schools there that are over in like Beverly Hills or up in the Malibu area, um, Bel Air, right? These public schools have like great graduation rates, fantastic literacy rates, like high college acceptance rates, right? And in the poor areas, there's like metal detectors, and there's kids not having like as high of a graduation rate, right? Not as high of literacy rates, definitely not as high as college acceptance rates. So the idea that like a parent will just get the money from the government and be able to take it over to those better schools, my hope would be, right, that would mean that now that's going to kind of balance it all out. And it's not going to be so much like if your parents are rich and you're able to grow up in a rich school district, you're going to have a higher like chance of success because they can't just concentrate all of the good resources in one district anymore. It's going to have to like spread out naturally as parents like flee failing schools. Would be my hope.
Hmm. Would school choice have helped you when you were in school?
Um, Possibly. I would also argue to a certain extent that I had a reasonable more amount of help than most people do, and I still managed to fuck it up more than once. So there are some people that I personally think that like we as a society just need to accept are going to keep on messing things up, but they still like deserve to live with dignity.
Hmm.
Like maybe they shouldn't be able to buy a PS5 right away, right? But like we can let them sleep inside. That being said, yeah, I think that it probably would have helped quite a few people in my community growing up, if not necessarily me. Though then again, like if I was like put into a different education system from an earlier age, who knows? Maybe life could have been drastically different.
Hmm. One of the things I proposed for the governor's race in New Hampshire is that if I win, I would work with the state legislature to make the property tax optional. So, like, because 2/3 of our property taxes goes towards funding the public schools, and I'm like, well, okay, if you don't have kids, you might not want to pay for the public schools. And as someone without kids, I think that that's kind of really valid. Why should I have to pay for your parenting choices? But B, it's also like if you don't want to send your kids to the public schools, then you can take that money and use it for somewhere else, use it to homeschool, use it for other things. And I think it's probably the directest possible way to defunding the schools, which I think is a necessary step if we want to I think we need a complete revolution in education. I don't think school choice is going to fix the problem because I think that most of the problem is in regards to the teacher staffing pool. So it's like even if you take your kids and you put them in another school, well, you might get some marginal increase, and I think that that's fine, and it's worth doing as like an interim. But I don't think ultimately it's going to fix the problem. I think that the only revolution we're going to have in education is when people are ultimately given no choice but to innovate and to do things differently, whether that's through homeschool pods or different types of charter schools. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think we have a fixable system the way it is.
Yeah, I would say I think the thing that's appealing for me about school choice is that option to be able to take money that's already going to schools and take it to a different school for like lower income families. And if you like eliminate the property tax, obviously you're moving in more of an abolition direction because you wouldn't then be able to give them the money to take to the other schools now. So I'd have to hear more about basically what kind of education is going to come along to replace it, or if it's just going to be like pure free market, you literally pay out of your pocket to send your kids to school, and then maybe how that would work um, there to really
Well, I
weigh
think
in one way or the other.
if you make it like a free market thing and I wouldn't just like pull the plug just like
Yeah, of
that. There's
course.
got to be some sort of like transition. But if you make it a free market thing, then inherently that's going to drive down the cost of education, and I think it'll also end up resulting in a lot more innovative educational models that would ultimately be better for students anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I guess like deregulation does like drive down the price of goods, but it just does sometimes like obviously drive down the quality of goods. So I guess I'd have to talk to somebody a
26% of
little
them
bit.
know how to do math, so I don't know how
Y-
much more we
y-
can drive down that quality.
Yeah, like I said, I'd have to talk to somebody in education, maybe who knows a little bit more than me about that,
Hmm.
to really like formulate a strong opinion one way or the other. But again, like the stats that you're citing now, like yeah, you're absolutely correct. You can't really diminish the quality of the good being offered much more, which is
Yeah.
usually the concern with deregulating a market. So I don't know.
I don't know. Well, what other things should we talk about? What else is on your mind lately in terms of what's going on in the world?
Well, I mean, we talked a little bit about inflation, but I was kind of
Ah,
curious, what would be the libertarian like response to drive that down at this point?
I think it would be ending the Fed, getting the Fed out of it, like stop the artificial like manipulation of money and currency.
Okay.
But
Um,
I'm not an expert on this topic at all. There are a great many libertarians that could probably speak to it better than I can.
yeah, because to me, like I'm no like lover of the Fed, believe it or not, and
Mhm.
as someone who's not really a big fan of capitalism, not a fan of central banks, so shocker. Um, and their solution to this seems to be that they say that we have to get the unemployment rate up to 7% at least for 2 years, and then inflation will begin to correct itself. Right now, the employment rate is at 4%, which sounds good, right? Because we don't want people to be unemployed. We like
Mhm.
them being productive and like contributing to the economy. But the Fed's now saying that we have to bump those numbers up. Those are very rookie numbers,
Oh,
right?
are they really? Oh
Yeah, no,
god.
they're saying that we
Oh
have to take
god.
employment from 4% to like 7% to like combat inflation. Keeping you in mind, by the way, that there are like 2 jobs for every person seeking work, according to people who say that they're having trouble finding workers right now. And the Fed's response to that is like, yeah, you know what? We actually gave the businesses so much fucking money that they're able to hire more people than they should be able to hire. So we've got to like drive that unemployment rate back up and like kill some jobs if we're going to be able to get out of this. And obviously nobody wants to do that. So inflation is just going to continue to like get progressively worse.
We are so fucked.
Yeah.
We really are. Like I'm deeply black-pilled about what's going on in the world right now. I was just listening to well, it's a spiritual thing, so people think it's woo-woo, but I was listening to this channel like a discussion about like looking at the spiritual side of January 6th and why January 6th happened. And basically what they said is it was like an agreed upon event that had to happen for the sake of humanity to get people to see that this is an untenable path that we're going on so that they actually start talking to each other and listening to each other. And I was like, oh, that sounds really hopeful. And then they were like, but it's going to take at least 2 more presidential administrations for that to happen. And I was like, oh, fuck, here we go.
Gonna be a fun ride. All right, yeah, no, we we are fucked. Like, the gas price of gas is gonna go up, the price of groceries is gonna go up, and wages are not keeping pace with those and haven't been for a very long time. So, again, the reason that both sides like are not talking to each other and hate each other so much right now is because their politicians are correct about one thing that they're telling them. They're telling them that things are getting worse, right? But they're also telling them that things are getting worse because of the people who politically disagree with you, not because I'm not doing my fucking job, right? Um,
who
so,
is who is the real enemy in the country right now, in your view?
um, I would say like the ultra wealthy, and people who basically mobilize their wealth in such a way that it exacerbates um, problems that we used to solve through like state funding by privatizing them and then like diminishing them in certain cases. But more than that, just people who like Jeff Bezos breaks up unions constantly. Well, not just Bezos specifically, Amazon.
Yeah. Oh, they hate unions. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think that with most libertarians that I talk to, some disagree with this to a certain extent, but they seem to be in agreement with like, as long as like if workers want to get together and like collectively bargain for the value of their labor with an employer in a free market, they should be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They should be able to offer a contract, and that contract should be honored. And it used to be that people like Jeff Bezos agreed with this because it wasn't that long ago that the alternative to this was beating down the factory owner's door and then beating him to death in front of his families. That's why, like, you now are supposed to let a union air their grievances. Um, but they're too safe now, so that's not obviously going to happen in a lot of these cases. They're using the literal Pinkertons to break up those unions. I'd say that's probably um, enemy number one for most Americans. Outside of that, the like far like actual fascist right that exist, those are starting
Yeah.
to be, yeah, a little bit more concerning, a little bit more willing to take things offline into the real world and to catastrophic results.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about that, and I haven't been talking much about it because I'm the only one that does, and then I get harassed by these people ad nauseum forever, and then PragerU likes to decide to declare that I was an anti-Semite for saying something against him. I was like, you motherfuckers! I've said like, you where the hell have you been? But no, I am actually much more concerned about that, and I see like again, like I see this thing on the right where they're back. I think they're backlashing against what the left is doing, but I think it's making everyone a lot more extreme. And even you have someone like, and I like Elijah Schaffer like a lot. I like him on a personal level, but he was declaring a couple weeks ago on Twitter he's not a conservative anymore, and I was like, well, what does that make you then, Elijah? Where are you going with your John Doyle best friend? Like, what is going on here? And and it's like, again, it's like I feel like both tribes are just pushing each other to their most extremes. And I mean, are you like, you take part in these conversations on you're mostly on Twitch, but like, do you see any willingness from the people that you're kind of interacting with to let their guard down and actually listen to what the other side is saying before they go in for the attack?
Um, no, and especially in places like Twitch or even on other kinds of social media, but especially things like Twitch or YouTube, right? Um, the algorithm incentivizes winning debates. It doesn't incentivize constructive dialogue. People,
Or claiming you won debates?
yeah, corn cobbing,
Mhm. Yeah.
um, is what, yeah, a lot of people on the left and right are doing now. But the algorithm incentivizes that kind of behavior much more than it does trying to actually have constructive conversations. Maybe sometimes be willing to say, yeah, I'm not well read enough on that. I don't really know. Let me look more into that. And then maybe exposing your audience to that information after. These aren't things that are incentivized. What's incentivized is conflict, dominating the enemy. Because again, people are being told the way things, the reason that things are getting worse is because of them. So now our ability to go online and watch somebody else own them is cathartic because we get to take out like our
Mm.
actual anger about the fact that things in our life are getting progressively worse. And then that also helps the people who are making it worse because it redirects our anger away from them and then back onto each other. This is
You know,
actually something that I would say like Marx got completely wrong because he thought that the uh, contradictions of capitalism would eventually make workers like rise up against the capitalist. No, they can redirect that conflict back on like the working class, and then you have like inter class conflict. And obviously, me personally, I don't think like a violent revolution would ever be successful anyway, especially now. They didn't have drones in Marx's alive. But even so, that conflict isn't driven back on each other violently all the time. It can be just, being mean to each other on the internet.
it's interesting. I hadn't thought about like watching debates on YouTube as kind of like a cope for like being unhappy with what's going on in the world or being unhappy with what's going on in your life. But you're 100% right about that. It's like, I'm frustrated. I have no way to. I can't change the price of gas. I can't change the fact that it's my grocery bill is going up. In New Hampshire, our heating rates or our energy rates are about to double at the end of the month, so that'll be really nice for everyone, I'm sure. I can't change any of that, but I can watch this person yell at someone else on the internet for 2 hours and then, be surrounded by people who are enjoying watching someone yell at someone else on the internet. And then that's my feedback loop. And then that starts to kind of create my reality in which I think that this is the only thing that exists in the world. And we can't possibly have reasonable conversations with people who we disagree with. That's a real problem.
Yeah, because the only time that you ever see the other side represented to you, it's through the lens of effectively a punching bag at this point for most people. And that's not what used to happen. Like I live in a red state. I'm a socialist that lives in a red state. I have to go outside, and if I thought that everybody here that voted for Trump wanted to kill me, I physically wouldn't be able to do that. I'd be too terrified. Right? But now some people don't have to go outside a concerning amount, and we're starting to kind of like see them construct their own realities via this like short-term dopamine feedback loops.
I am absolutely convinced that Twitter makes people insane. Like
Yes.
being on Twitter too much makes them insane. Have you seen the same thing?
Yeah, no, I again, like board members of all these companies have like one of them a piece that has a whistleblower that's come out and said, yeah, no, the machine learning algorithm has like latched on to a mechanism that does drive our profits quite a bit. but is also making people mentally ill. And we have the internal data that demonstrates that, and then Congress like calls them before them to be like, why would you not share this data? And they're like, we're not compelled to show data that incriminates us to you. It's like, but everybody in society uses this shit now. Like, if this is having an effect on people's brains, we need to like understand why at like the federal government's level so that they can start legislating and trying to like create programs that are going to address these problems. Because you I don't know how we're also not having a conversation with all this mass shooting stuff, right? That mass shootings seem to increase like with the rate of 4G access, the same way that it does for political polarization, right?
Huh.
People's ability to constantly plug themselves into the internet is making them, if not mentally ill, worse for most people because they
Yeah.
don't use it healthily.
That's really fascinating. I hadn't thought of that connection before, but I think that that makes a ton of sense, you know? How do you perceive, as a socialist, how do you perceive Democrats and how do you perceive Republicans right now? Just in general as a collective, knowing that there is nuance within those categories.
Yeah, so Republicans, I would say that they're definitely the more reactionary of the two, but they're both more reactionary than the other in different ways. Republicans that are typically going to be more reactionary on social issues, more likely to, kind of like me, be a bit of a prude, where it's like the whole like, okay, well, maybe I don't want the kid going to the strip club, right? And I understand why that's yucky, but then they will go so far as to want to impose like their opinions onto other people, like legislatively, and that's where you kind of lose that. Economically, very much in disagreement with the Republicans, right? I think that we should just like tax the shit out of the ultra wealthy. Kind of like from an economic standpoint, we have the sink that's clogged right now. We're going to take the stopper out of the sink, let it drain.
Mhm.
We want to drain that money out of the economy where it has the least velocity. So Jeff Bezos' offshore account. So just simple stuff like that the Republicans are never going to agree with me on. Yeah, there's not much that I can find common ground with. But that being said, I would say that unlike most people on the far left, I don't see them as ontologically evil. One of my very close friends is a conservative, right? Actually teaches at like the college level. Um, and he's not a bad guy. We just like disagree politically. Democrats are useless, is what I would say I feel about them right now. They're able to win elections every now and then. They're not great at winning elections, but they do it every now and then, like they did this last time. And then they do nothing with their power to actually like deliver any promises to their base. And then we get to the midterms like we are right now, and they're like, well, Roe was on the ballot.
Mhm.
Roe was on the ballot last time. What happened? Been like a year and a half that Roe was on the ballot last time, and legislatively, the only thing that happened with Roe was from the other party, and it wasn't good. Um, so yeah, I would personally probably say that I see the reason that we should still vote Democrat, in my opinion, to try and like stop things from getting worse, like through Republican control. I'm empathetic to that argument, but I don't think that yelling at people on the internet that like you're a bad person not voting Democrat is reasonable at this point. That if you want to have the conversation, you should try to be as empathetic as possible to the reasons that people want to, and there are many of those.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of feel like the same way, but more I would direct it towards Republicans, where Republicans think that they can convince people to wake up to like the amount that they're lied to by the media by calling them a libtard over and over and over again. I'm like, that's really not going to be successful at all. You're just creating more Democrats that way, and they just do not understand that at all in any way. I'm like, okay, well, and it almost seems to me like Republicans don't even care about winning. I think that Republicans are much more comfortable being a controlled opposition party. They don't take any action to win. They have like one activist in Scott Pressler, and he's like their only activist that they have basically in the country, and they don't even support him, and they basically like ignore him and pretend he doesn't exist. And so, it's kind of funny that some of the criticism that you have for the Democrats is criticism that I have for the Republicans. Um, what do you think about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
Um, I think that Joe Biden is the most progressive president that we've ever had historically, and I think that that speaks volumes as to how low the bar was when he got there. Um, he's nothing special. Like, he's just doing bare minimums what he's got to basically keep the country from collapsing, and not doing a great job of that at all the time either. Like,
Do you think he has dementia?
I couldn't call it one way or the other. I don't know. I don't think that we see him enough to like know if it's dementia. I think he has a lot
Well,
of
that might be a
gaffes.
sign, isn't it?
Yeah, I think he has a lot of gaffes. But I don't know. I don't know necessarily what dementia looks like completely. I'm not familiar on it enough that I would like want to make a call one way or the other. And also, I don't think we see him enough to really know.
Did you see this clip last week where he was reading on the teleprompter?
Yeah, and I saw Kamala Harris just like stone facing it the whole way through, and I was
Oh
just like,
gosh, she did
damn.
not flinch. I was like, that was actually probably the more shocking bit for me was that like no one flinched when Joe Biden read end of sentence, repeat the line or something like that.
Yeah, and
Like
he
my
caught
god.
himself because he got stumbled up on the next little part of his speech.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty flustered, but like no, nobody reacted at all. They just stayed there stone faced. I was pretty impressed with that. But yeah, it doesn't look great. Um, I just don't know if I'd go so far as to like start diagnosing him with mental illnesses personally. It's not really
Mm-hmm.
something that I feel like I'm qualified to comment on.
Fair enough. What do you think of Kamala Harris?
I mean, I feel the same way about her that I probably would every other ex attorney general of like, that operated in California.
Mm-hmm.
Probably have as many positive things to say about her as I would any other person in that profession, which is somebody who was active in like the BLM movement in California. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a lot of positive things to say about cops, so especially from that state.
Fair enough.
Um, yeah.
Who do you think will be the candidate in 2024 for both the Democrats and the Republicans?
I think it's going to be, DeSantis and Biden.
I really want Trump Hillary. I really do.
Oh God.
It would be amazing.
It would just, yeah. I think Hillary's expressed. Thankfully, Hillary said that she's not going to run again.
Oh, that doesn't mean
Um,
anything.
I want to hope it does. I don't know. And this isn't even like, I don't necessarily think that Hillary deserves all the hate that she gets,
Mhm.
but she's politically like not viable. The woman is toxic. Her like family is toxic at this point. Like, you're not going to win the elections as a Clinton anymore. Just take the money and run, please. Like, the jig is up.
Here's hoping. Well, not really. Tony says, "Hi, Spectre. It's Hyper. How you been, man? Got to chat." I don't
Hey,
know.
buddy.
Yeah. Thank you for stopping by. And guys, if you are one of Spectre's fans, I hope you'll consider subscribing to the channel. I don't do right-wing commentary like some people might say I do. I'm actually interested in both sides, and I think both sides suck pretty equally at this point. So you might be a good fit for my channel if you think both sides suck equally as well. AD says the government gave people and businesses so much money that the government distorted demand more than the market can supply it. That is inflation. Thank you, AD, for that succinct definition. All right. Well, we're kind of coming up on 90 minutes here. What else are there any other topics we should make sure we hit on before we close it out?
I honestly can't think of any. I feel like we got through most of the
The
current
important
goings
stuff.
on. Yeah. Um, no,
Hmm.
can you think of anything?
I mean, what do you think about Ukraine and all that stuff that's going on over there?
Oh, I mean, yeah, solidarity with the Ukrainians, obviously. Fuck Putin.
Mm-hmm.
He's a fucking fascist. Not a fan of that. And yeah, I hope that they are able to get out of a situation where this is a protracted war that it looks like it's going to be for a while now. Hopefully that would not be the case, but as long as it is, we should do what we can to support the Ukrainians.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, I agree. My husband's from Ukraine. My brother-in-law is on the front lines of the war, and so I'm obviously on Team Ukraine. But I got to tell you, it was like, I don't think Ukraine's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Like this neo-Nazi like faction that they have is a real thing. I don't think it's as big as people say it is. It's not well known by the general population in the way that people like to articulate that it is. So I think that a lot of the people posting about like neo-Nazis in Ukraine are being alarmist at best. to be
Yeah.
honest, and hyperbolic about what it is. I don't think it's good by any means, but I don't also think it's the demon that people think it is. But I got to tell you, it's like seeing the way that the right reacted to this in terms of like everyone has a Ukraine flag in their profile, therefore we have to be against Ukraine on general principle. I was like, fuck you assholes. And even I had on Twitter like a Ukraine flag in my profile for a while because I'm sorry, my husband's from there. Like it's his country. I'm going to support them. Like I was getting so much hate from conservatives just based on that flag and I was like, you guys are idiots. Like no, like this is not how you win people to your side at all. Putin, like I don't I like in the how quick some of them are to take the side of Putin in this. And I kind of understand Putin's point of view in terms of like I understand him not wanting NATO on his doorstep. However, like this is our fault. This is the United States' fault. NATO should have been dissolved a long time ago. And so, I just don't it's just like seeing the right-wing backlash and them overtly supporting Russia. I was like that's not cool either.
Yeah, and I think that, like, just to take their propaganda piece by piece, because I have had this argument many times too, but I usually have it, ironically enough, with the far left, who decided
Mhm.
that they were going to support Putin because there was, like, too many Ukraine flags in
Really?
people's bios on Twitter, so they
Oh
got
my
tankies that are now
god.
like, "Yeah, no, Putin's a communist, and he's going to return the USSR to its former glory, and we should be supporting him against US imperialism." And it's like, Putin has more Nazis working for him than the Ukrainians have in their country. Like,
Mhm.
like you have what's his name? Alexander, I'm blanking on it now, but like
Mhm.
doing literal blood and soil shit to like justify the war, for example. The Wagner Group. He's been like photographed with like members of that neo-Nazi organization, right? So Putin doesn't get to scream Nazi and then like go rolling into people's countries if he's not going to take care of it his own, first of all. Second, president's Jewish, so yeah, the Jewish president of the neo-Nazi country, very funny. Um, Also, like, Putin is going to wipe out, like, pretty much any kind of political opposition if he wins this war the same way that he does everywhere, which is why even if you are on the far left and you're like, we have criticisms of Ukraine, we have criticisms of Zelensky, but there are people there who also have those criticisms that are going to be murdered under Putin that are able to, like, participate in the democratic process freely right now under Zelensky.
Mhm.
So it's like a matter of damage control or like the picking the lesser of two evils in this case, I suppose, which would be that the Ukrainian government hopefully continues to become more westernized, as it were, as it interacts with us and the West. And yeah, I have my criticisms of NATO. I think that some of the concessions that Turkey asked for, from example, from like Sweden and Finland, were a little bit concerning.
Mhm.
Right, and I think that NATO expansion can be bad in like unforeseen ways when it comes to stuff like that. But at the same time, it is kind of nice that Poland, for example, doesn't have to worry about Russia invading them because they can just hit the Article 5 button and everybody in the country is now, or sorry, almost everybody in the world is now at war with Russia.
Mhm.
And I think that those kind of defensive pacts, if Russia is going to act in this expansionist way moving forward, are unfortunately going to be necessary. So until such a time when Russia is not a threat to everybody that lives next door to them, yeah, we probably need more NATO membership, unfortunately.
Mm. I might disagree with you on that point, but I don't
Yeah,
care enough to argue it
fair
at
enough.
this juncture. I mean, it's like it was so like ridiculous to me because people were like, "Well, Zelensky is corrupt. Ukraine is corrupt." I'm like, you think Russia and Putin aren't corrupt? Like Zelensky might be corrupt on some levels, but like he's probably the least corrupt president that they've had in a while. And if you want to go back to like 2015 when they had their revolution, like the Ukrainian people wanted that revolution. And you can talk about how the United States like spurred them on. Okay, fine, whatever. But the Ukrainian people wanted that revolution, and it's not a perfect situation for them, but it is less corrupt. Is less corrupt now than it was like 5 years ago.
Yeah, there's this collection on the left that call themselves tankies. We more accurately call them campus, right? And their only
Mhm.
political opinions are formed on like if America's for it, I'm against it. And that's who ended up supporting Russia in this conflict. And I think on the right, people like the neocons tend to just not want to support anything that a Democrat politician from here comes out in support of, and that was grain for them. So it's interesting how much communist, as it were, and the far right and neocons are actually agreeing with each other on foreign relations now. It's very interesting.
It's horseshoe theory in action
Yeah.
to some respect. Well, I guess the last question I have is, you say you're like a left-leaning libertarian. Have you thought about moving to New Hampshire?
No, hasn't crossed my mind.
Why not?
I've honestly never looked into New Hampshire, like even a little bit. I don't think I could tell you the name of a city in New Hampshire.
I mean,
So
the libertarian candidate for governor is polling at 8% without trying.
I don't know what that tells me about the people who are already in charge, though, and how things are going. So I don't know if that's making a case for it or not.
So in New Hampshire, we actually have you heard of the Free State Project?
Very vaguely.
So the Free State Project is basically this thing where we're trying to get as many libertarians as possible to move to New Hampshire. And whether you're right leaning or left leaning, we don't really care. We care about like people who understand like libertarianism and private property and non-aggression principle and things like that. And so it's now starting to reach a critical mass where libertarians actually have political power in New Hampshire. So there are many thousands of people who have moved here because of the Free State Project. They're also getting more people that already live here, were natively born here, involved in the Free State Project. And right now, about 25% of our House of Representatives are actually made up of libertarians, but they're registered as Republicans because actually some of them are registered as Democrats too, but like they're registered in one of the two major parties because that's what they need to do to get elected. But they are libertarians at their core. And so we actually do have a lot of political power here. And we're ranked like the number one most free state in the country by Cato, of all places, who put us a distant number one ahead of Florida, just because of all of the deregulation that the libertarians have actually been able to do in the state house. So I don't know. It's a pretty good place to live for right now. We're actually talking about secession. We had the first ever vote on state secession in the country since the Civil War, just back in the last legislative session, and it failed admirably, but it was the first vote since the Civil War, which I think is, says something.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys were actually able to secede and then somehow find a way through the like 2/3 of Congress that it then has to agree,
Oh, we don't
um,
think they have to
then
agree. We actually have it written
oh,
into
is there
our
a
state.
constitutional argument against that?
We have it in our state
Beautiful.
constitution that we have the right to revolution in our state constitution.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, then you would just have to find like a judge in the courts to basically say that you're right and that you don't have to ask Congress's opinion at that point, which is been demonstrated to be increasingly easy to do, to use the courts to kind of just say fuck you with like that.
Hmm.
So yeah, I could see that being a sexual strategy. If it is, and you guys are able to like, let some left-leaning anarchists start their own little commune in some like backfield in New
Yeah.
Hampshire, that could be interesting. That'd be freedom to see the principles of like free association uh play out would be quite nice.
Well, you should come to Pork Fest next year. It just happened a couple weeks ago, but it's a libertarian festival where we basically take over a campground and we build our own little libertarian utopia, and there are no cops allowed. They know not to come on the campground. We can do whatever the f we want, and it's honestly like the nicest week of the year to live in a completely voluntary society. Where just like I mean, and there are communists. There are like left leaning people. There are a lot. We have people who defect from Vermont for a week to come to Pork Fest, and you know I think you should dig it. You should come up next year.
Yeah, no, you had me at pork.
Ah,
That sounds
it's
awesome.
porcupine. Porcupine. It's not for bacon. Although you can
Oh,
buy
bummer.
bacon, you can definitely get it. Like people set up grills at their campsites, and they sell like some of the best food you've ever.
Nice. Well,
Uh oh,
oh,
you're starting to break up. Oh wait,
yep,
you're back. Hang
yep.
on.
Looks like my
Okay.
internet's starting to finally do its thing to me here.
Well, all good because we're about to wrap up anyway. But Spectre, thank you for joining for me for what is a nice little relaxing chat. And it was, it was nice and refreshing to be able to talk to someone you disagree with. But we don't actually disagree on that much stuff. I don't think we disagree on some things, but not to the point where we're arguing, which is really nice. Do you want to tell the people where they can find you?
Yeah, right now I'm on Twitter. I'm taking a break from streaming because, as is happening right now, my internet's kind of been a little bit spotty every now and then. But here in a couple of months when I should be moved, I'll probably be back on YouTube, and we'll put all of my stuff on how to get there on Twitter at that point. So long story short, just follow me on Twitter for now. And I'm around doing this kind of stuff.
Cool. All right, guys. And I do have Spectre's info in the description below. So if you want to make sure you follow him and support what he's doing, I think that'd be really great, because the more that we can actually talk to other people, I think the better we are going to be. I'm going to pull you off the screen for a second and do a little bit of shilling, and we'll be right back. All right, guys, that's all we have for right now. But as a reminder, I will be going live, well, not live, but in a private Zoom call with my locals community in about half an hour. So you have plenty of time to sign up and join. And actually, if you go over to the monthly option and use the promo code July, right now, you can apply. You're going to get a free month in locals, which means you can join us for our community Zoom call at 7. Check us out, see what we're doing, and just come hang out. Like, the really good people in my locals, we come from all different points of view. We talk about everything. You can talk about whatever you want in the community Zoom call. You can complain about what's going on in the news. You can talk about what's going on in your life. You can ask for support from people. It really is. It maintains my sanity. And I'm so grateful for my locals members who make it possible for me to keep the channel going. You can sign up for that for $5 a month, or get your free month and start now. Or if you're already like convinced, you're like, yeah, I want to do this for the whole year, you can do that for $50 for the year, which gives you 2 months for free. And I really appreciate that. Guys, that is all I have for the stream today. I will be streaming tomorrow. I will be streaming by myself. I have an idea of what I might be talking about, but I'm not 100% sure yet. And then, of course, tomorrow we also have our Nothing Remotely Controversial with Joshua at 9:30. But as a reminder, we got a couple more DISENRAGE chats coming up this week. We've got Did Hitler Go to Hell with Dan Smots on Wednesday. And then we've got What's It Like to Grow Up in a Christian Cult with Jennifer on Thursday. Really looking forward to both those conversations. That's all we've got for right now, guys. Take care, and we'll see you soon.